Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining M33 Integrated's webinar titled 3 Resolutions to Not Break in 2013. My name is Andy Williams, and I'm a partner with M33 Integrated, and I look forward to working with you today and going through a series of ideas around some various resolutions that over the years we have captured from customers and clients, as well as have helped generate through some of our consultation approaches. I'm going to try my best to make this lively and enlightening, and look forward to getting feedback from everyone who's on the call, as well as anyone who may listen to this afterwards through our recording. I would invite all of you, for those that may want to pass this along, to please, after the webinar, give us a day or two, and we will have this up on our website. And we'll give you instructions at the end of the webinar as to how to go download this and be able to send it to other peers, coworkers, and anyone else who may benefit from this. And we'd be happy to share or speak with anyone concerning some of the ideas that we talk about today. So thank you for joining us. We've got a great group today. I've seen the names of all those that have signed up, and quite a large population or group of various industries that are being represented here. Hope that this will provide some insight, and look forward to getting some feedback from you guys. We'll go ahead and get started. Well, when we talk about resolutions, I think one of the first things that may come to mind for most companies is some of our typical New Year's resolutions, and that would include everything from losing weight, maybe getting in shape. Obviously, the gyms around the country love the first month of every year, and hopefully we'll continue to see some volume go through there in the second and third months of each year. Another thing we see often is eat healthier, save more money, spend more time with the family. Whatever the resolution is that you have defined for your business or for your personal life, you probably started off by asking a couple of questions. The first, and I actually took an exercise a while back through an organization that was pretty beneficial, and it helped us break down some of the basic components of why we do what we do. It starts off by asking the question, where do I want to be? Once you find out where you want to be and engage it against some of the desires that you may have as an outcome, the next question is when do I want to get there? The third thing that we often say after that is, what do I need to do to get us there? And then the last thing is that as I begin down that path, how will I know if I am on track? So hopefully today, as we talk through some of our New Year's resolutions as they relate to our company and specifically to your supply chain, we can define where we would come up with some of those ideas and identify some of the answers around that, and how to maintain a visual of if we are on track, and if we're not on track, what do we need to do to get back on track. We wanted to keep it very simple, so we started off trying to identify 3 particular resolutions that we feel like are critical, and we've heard from a lot of you guys that maybe you've reached out to us and said, hey, how do I accomplish this? This is what I've been charged with. As a matter of fact, this is the time of the year that so often we hear our business development group and our account management group get feedback from some of you that recognizes some of the goals that you've been given by maybe your boss, or either if you are the ultimate boss, you've defined for the company. And so we tried to break those down into 3 core categories here. And the first is define and maintain critical KPIs. The second one that we will go through is considered controlling the market impact. And then the third one is developing departmental distribution targets. Now that's a mouthful, but what we're trying to do is identify some very easy, very quick to recognize some of the benchmarks and define the ultimate answer to where do we want to be and how do we get there. We recognized a quote last year at the TDL Summit 2012 from New Carolina that I really enjoyed, and I think it's worth re-looking at. It said, transportation problems are not caused by a failure to create plans, but instead are due to a failure to implement these plans. I would challenge you to think broader from a transportation perspective, but from a distribution model. And in general, as we carve out the component of your business and your industry that a company like M33 is involved with, we often see it deals with a lot more than just freight carriers, trucking companies, and things of that nature. So as we're pursuing this, we want to define that it is fun to build a plan and build on a strategy. But if we don't execute it successfully, then we should not expect whatever result we were hoping to accomplish. So we'll dive into the first one, define and maintain critical KPIs. I want to start off by talking a little about KPIs. I think so often that is an overused term, and it ultimately stands to represent key performance indicators. However, a lot of people look at it and say, well, that's just a various array of reports. I would define the difference in reports and KPIs as reports typically are numbers on paper. KPIs are strategy with a outcome. And so from a KPI perspective, we aren't simply just saying, how does this look? We've already decided that there is something we need to do. And as a result, we need to recognize how we go about seeing what the impact is as we begin progressing down that road. So as we talk about why key performance indicators, there's three categories, and I want to make it very simple. Three major things we want to accomplish when we decide what key performance indicators we're looking for. The first one is clarity. We can't manage what we can't see. And so from a clarity perspective in our world, we have two major variables. One is supply chain costs, and the other is performance. Supply chain costs are often tied to those tactical components of your business that relate to transportation and warehousing spend. However, the performance variables often play a role in taking that same data set and recognizing how variables outside of supply chain costs are being impacted. And I'll give you an example here in a minute. The second piece we want to look at is vision and direction. Vision and direction represents an understanding that we see the information, we recognize what it means, and now we are beginning to define what a solution would look like and how to go about accomplishing that solution. KPIs not only need to share information with you, but they need to define the actionable intelligence that needs to occur in order to accomplish an ROI that you may desire. Again, going back to where do I want to be. The third category would be considered taking control. Again, this is something that key performance indicators must do for you. It must give you the opportunity to see what's going on, to define an actionable intelligence, and then to recognize as you deploy the resources and the solution to accomplish that actionable intelligence, you can see how it's changing. You can see how you're pursuing and progressing on that. And as a result, you should recognize behavior change around these solutions. If all of the processes and all of the users and employees around the solution maintain the same focus as they did before the solution was put in place, there's a great chance there was no change at all. At M33, we use a lot of different graphs and various Six Sigma Lean charts and forms to define where we want to go as a company. And also we help our customers through a consultative viewpoint of what's important to them. And I can tell you this is an old analysis model that a lot of you guys probably have used before, but I would highly encourage you to continue to look at it and maybe throw it out into the group that as you're talking about various ideas of where you want to be, why would you want to get there? And it's called a SWOT analysis, and it's very simple. I'll just explain it briefly. The top two categories represent internal components. The bottom two categories represent external components. So if you look at the first upper left-hand corner, what you're doing is sitting down in the group who are users affected by where you want to be, and you're identifying what strengths you have today to ultimately get there. The upper right-hand category represents what weaknesses you have today to get there. You know, if you want to increase your sales revenue from $500 million to $1 billion, and you recognize that you are not going to be able to employ any new individuals or buy any new technology to automate some of your processes, that would be considered a weakness. The bottom left-hand category represents opportunities, and this is where you define what would occur and what benefit you and other people would get from pursuing this initiative. And then the bottom right-hand category would be considered threats. These are very important because a lot of times you can take the threats and you can do separate analyses on each individual threat to realize what the true impact could be. An example of a threat could be recognized as, if I do grow to a billion-dollar company, chances are we can't manage it with the same level of resources we have today. So therefore, we will need to make a change or this will not work. So back to the key performance indicators, I would highly encourage you, as you identify a goal as to what you think you want to do, take it through a SWOT analysis, and then you can identify from the SWOT analysis and that step back and putting all your thoughts on a piece of paper mentality, what should you be measuring? A lot of our customers ask us to measure very simple components of their business, things such as weight per shipment, energy cost reductions, market conditions, and maybe transit days. We're working with several companies today to reflect on a shift in some of their distribution points and what the impact would be on transit days. Other companies may look at it and say, I need to understand what the impact will be from a service perspective. And in another case, you may say, well, I'd like to know how likely our vendors are in choosing the carriers and using the resources that we've given them to route their freight, which would be considered routing compliance. And still others want to measure information from a shipping unit perspective. And then lastly, you can see at the bottom, a lot of the three bottom categories represent what we would consider behavior change. And behavior change defines a thing that is occurring today, a desired result, and then the actionable intelligence that says it's not a customer vendor situation. It is more of a employee change the way they manage the model or manage the business perspective. So as an example, you may look at your top 20 shipping points and recognize various patterns as to where they're changing their ordering processes. So that would actually take you down another trail that says I need to understand why that's happening. I'll give you an example of one of the key performance indicators that several of our customers have adopted. They want to understand what the profitability levels are from month to month as it pertains to supply chain costs by specific product level. So as an example, I've given you some various SKU numbers for certain products, and I've given you trend information here that recognizes when those product-specific supply chain costs go up or down. And you may see a positive trend based on some initiative that you put in place, or it could be simply one customer that has changed their order patterns. In other cases, you may see a negative trend. Oftentimes, because we're looking at historical data, unless you define this as a standard, regular key performance indicator you want to monitor, by the time you realize what is occurring, the profitability has already gone out the door with limited effort to be able to, or limited ability to be able to change that. In other words, let's say it's December and you realize now that your profitability for gold here at the bottom has digressed due to the fact that your average cost per unit has increased over time from 2.21 cents or 2.21 cents a pound or to $2.26 a pound. How long does it take for you to make a decision and adjust to the market as a result of that? Lastly, I'll give you a couple tips on this first category for getting started. Number one, outline what is important to you. Secondly, outline what is important to your customers. A lot of times these are the one and the same, but I would highly recommend that you separate them because very seldom do you see your desires being matched identically to what your customers' desires are. A third category could be determine how often the measurements should be reported and who will be pulling and monitoring that data. That's a key level of importance because everybody starts with great expectations, but if you don't consistently pull it, view it, and do something about it, it will get out from under you. Determine what actions will be taken from the results. Have time set aside to accomplish those actions. And then finally, just keep it flexible. Don't remain constant on a program or an initiative as resulting from a key performance indicator that doesn't take you down the right path. I'll talk for a minute on controlling the marketplace. When we talk about controlling the market impact, a lot of times what we see is that individuals have chalked up to cost of doing business various components that they don't feel like is within their control. And so as an example of that one would be considered fuel cost. You know, oftentimes we see it takes a mix of technology with human knowledge of our products and customers in order to really understand the impact of something such as fuel. We all know that there is nothing we can do to control fuel costs. They're going to fluctuate in the marketplace. We've had customers recently ask us, what do we think is going to happen in 2013 as far as fuel compared to last year? And I've got to tell you, we always suggest that we will tell you what the analysts are saying, but no one seems to have a crystal ball, and rarely do we see the analysts being 100% spot on. So as a result, what we anticipate is that customers are going to see changes in fuel, but it's how they manage those fuel costs and how they view them from a historical perspective and a forecast perspective based on letting history tell a future story is where they'll be successful or not. Many of M33's customers have defined a rules-based engine to identify what they should do and how they should prepare their customers for fuel cost increases. Other companies will look at their overall model of where they're shipping to and how fuel impacts those models. Because our industry is so often tied to a percent of what the base rates are for most modes, then even though fuel may increase percent-wise, if you can manipulate or manage the base rates, you may be able to minimize the impact of fuel. I mentioned a little bit about implementing technology to provide intelligence. We also want to talk a little bit about mode consideration. And then finally, as I've always stated in every webinar we've ever discussed on key performance indicators, if you are not finding a way to pass industry increases along to customers, you will eventually realize your profitability significantly declining. And I can tell you that we work with a lot of industries, and we've heard a lot of stories, but at the end of the day, the consumer must eventually accept some of these increases. GRIs represents general rate increases. And unfortunately, we do work in an industry who general rate increases are considered a standard practice. As a matter of fact, general rate increases typically were an annual event, and in 2011, for the first time in history, it became a biannual event, in other words, or 2 times a year, I should say. So therefore, we saw 2 rate increases occur across all the major carriers in 2011, and since then, average general rate increases occur approximately every 9 to 10 months. So the question is, what can we do with all of the changes from government regulations, equipment expenses, labor adjustments, all of the various things that our transportation and logistics industry experience on a regular basis? What can we do to recognize those, accommodate the carriers, but at the same time not accept these extensive general rate increases? Well, there are quite a few things that you can work on. As we talk through general rate increases, one of the things we recognize is that analysis, again, is a key part of this. And I would start off by asking a question. When you are working with your vendors and your providers for helping them accommodate some of their cost increases, are you specifically analyzing the impact to your primary distribution points before accepting the increases? This is not saying no to the providers, but what it is doing is it's taking an intelligent perspective and not simply saying I'm okay with a 2% increase or I'm okay with a 6% increase. It's looking at how it's going to impact you personally. And sometimes that requires taking a lot of information and diving into the details to ultimately recognize which of your customers, which of your products are going to be the most impacted. You know, with some research, you can often accommodate the carrier's needs while maintaining profitability in your own major lanes. We often see other areas too where we really encourage our client network to watch out for surprises. There are so many components simply to a bill of lading that if slightly tweaked can often help you reduce or at least avoid some significant cost changes. You may not know this, but there are often times where there tends to be an industry push to gain profitability from a common carrier perspective in certain areas. And there's nothing wrong with them encouraging or pursuing this. The question is, are you covering all the bases you need to cover to make sure that if you do need to incur that cost, you're only incurring it in the areas where it's necessary? A great example of this is oftentimes from a small package perspective. Customers realize that they have an urgent need from one of their customers, and they will mark a certain product or a certain shipment for air delivery. What they fail to recognize, and maybe they don't have the metrics to view this, is that oftentimes those air deliveries are the same transit time as maybe a ground delivery would occur. Yet you're going to incur the air delivery cost despite the fact that both trucks may back up at the same time to the destination. Other things we often hate talking about but regularly have to deal with is damage or lost products. And there are so many things that we can do, not only from a bill of lading perspective, but working with our providers to reduce the damage potential when managing our product. You see some other things on here: contact information, weight specs, special requirements, and I would also recommend that many of our clients are encouraged to do a yearly review of their National Motor Freight Classification codes. What we don't often get regular visibility into is the consistency in which the National Motor Freight Classification Committee makes changes to these codes. And a slight change to the code could cause a significant increase to your cost. I would also recommend considering alternative modes. Many of you have looked at things such as rail or maybe various other forms of distribution, maybe switching to a less than truckload model. But there are continual changes in the marketplace. So what may not have made sense 2 years ago could be different today. I would highly recommend that if you don't have a provider, to reach out, talk with someone, and recognize if there are some other means of moving product, especially on interplant shipments, where it's maybe not quite as time sensitive, to actually reduce overall cost. Some of the variables that we've gone over today: fuel, general rate increases, surprise fees, and mode selection. All of these can be within your grasp, and you can control them despite the fact that the market will continue to push these. The last thing I want to talk to today, and I know we're getting close on time, is developing departmental distribution targets. I don't think I could say that 3 times in a row without messing it up. But I do want to share a little bit about that. You know, again, I think so often, because we are in an industry where it's often considered a necessary evil, we tend to find ourselves inside a box and don't think to the model that says, what can we do to improve this if we've already squeezed the providers as tight as we can to get the cost as low as we can? Well, there's a lot of things that we often share with companies, and let me take a step back and talk through this real quick. You know, if you can imagine the life cycle of a given shipment, it so often touches more departments than what we immediately give it credit for. So as an example, we often say it's in the shipping department or in the procurement or logistics department where we can most impact our cost in supply chain. But that may not be true, because for every dollar we see that a supply chain manager ultimately reduces the cost of their shipping, so often customer service can impact it $3. And it has nothing to do with dealing with the vendors to reduce their cost. It has to do with understanding patterns and trends and setting goals to help customers or their vendors improve where they want to be to help everybody win-win. Let me give you an example of a couple of these goals. What if you were able to look at a report like I have up here at the top? You see the client name here is Johnny's Appleseed Company. And you were able to identify that across a period of time, there are certain customers who order consistently, and you're shipping consistently to them to the point where you recognize that maybe their ordering patterns almost represent a just-in-time mentality. Now, what if you were able to work with those customers based on a view from a historical perspective to say, hey, I'd like to change your ordering patterns, and I can incentivize you as a result of changing those ordering patterns? This is an example of a report we do for a lot of our customers that identifies that possible savings just with a simple conversation. The one below it recognizes a slightly different approach to that. And what it does is it identifies a goal, and maybe this is in customer service, maybe this is in sales, but a goal for one of those 2 departments to increase profitability at the specific point of order. So what you see at the bottom here is a breakout of cost, in this specific case, cost per pound for, let's call it our customer Micro Cola, whenever they categorize their orders in different weight breaks. So let me give you an example. Let's say Ann places an order for 500 pounds today to go to her facility, Micro Cola, and As she places that order, I take the order, and as I ship it, I experience a cost of 30 cents per pound. She calls tomorrow and she places an order for 2,000 pounds. Well, guess what? Even though it's the same product, I'm going to sell it at the same price, my cost per pound is now 10 cents on the second order. Now let's take a step back and pretend that Ann placed that order for 500 pounds, and she shared with me at the time that she's probably going to call again tomorrow to place a 2,000 pound order. What if I were to share with her that I would actually give her an incentive in the moment to reduce her product cost by 2 cents a pound if she would place it all right now? It sounds to her like it's a better fit, and what she doesn't realize is that I'm going to take the 500 pounds that I was going to sell her with a cost of 30 cents a pound down to 10 cents. So it's a win-win for both of us, and it doesn't even take in consideration the efficiencies realized in the manufacturing component of not having to manufacture 2 products versus 1. Couple of key takeaways on setting goals by department that can ultimately drive supply chain costs down. One is you have to have the right key performance indicators in order to really recognize where you want to be. You also, as you saw from the previous report, have to have key performance indicators to share with the department what they would need to do, the actionable items, in order to achieve those goals. Secondly, you've got to maintain control of this. You can't allow it to be presented and then simply not review it a month later. Third is it often touches multiple departments, and so therefore it may include sitting down and doing a SWOT analysis and recognizing who all will be involved, and make sure each of those departments knows their responsibilities and are held accountable to them. And then finally, I would just highly recommend, it's hard to do anything like this if you don't engage technology to help you. We've reached the end of our webinar, and I really hope that this was a help to you guys. If you saw anything or heard anything in today's webinar that would lead you to want to know more about this, please feel free to reach out to myself or whoever your current contact is at M33 Integrated. If you don't have a current contact, you can go to our website and look at our contact information. I've also listed at the bottom here my contact information. I would be happy to share with you. And if you're a client on the call today and you don't feel like there are things in here that you are aware of, we would be happy to share this with you. So please feel free to reach out to us. This webinar will be available within a couple of days on our intranet, under our webinar tab. So please feel free to reach out and pass this along. Thank you for your time and look forward to hearing back from you. Let me see if there's any questions real quick. One of the questions that was asked was, is it possible to download a copy of the PowerPoint you presented? The answer is yes. And we should have that available on our website within a couple of days. And we will also push it out to those who were on this particular presentation. Let me see if there's any other questions. Excellent. Looks like there aren't any more questions. Again, thank you for your time. We look forward to hearing back from all of you, and we hope that you saw this as a value to your day. Thank you again, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye.